The cause of America is in a great measure the cause of all mankind. Many circumstances have and will arise, which are not local, but universal, and through which the principles of all lovers of mankind are affected, and in the event of which their affections are interested. The laying a country desolate with fire and sword, declaring war against the natural rights of all mankind, and extirpating the defenders thereof from the face of the earth, is the concern of every man to whom nature hath given the power of feeling, of which class, regardless of party censure, is the author.
This is Plausibly Live.
Many years ago, can't tell you the exact date, but I can tell you where I was. Pueblo, Colorado. A question came to my mind. If this is what we say this is, why doesn't it work? It was a question that set me on a journey. It's a journey that I do not recommend. It's a journey that if you were to come to me and say, hey Dave, can I do that? I can't tell you not to, but I can tell you that it's a journey that comes with controversy, argument, debate, self-doubt, questions, broken relationships, lost friendships, and a lot of other things. It also comes with great joy. When I left my faith tradition, the faith tradition of my childhood that I had been raised in, I don't really know how much I've talked about this in the past, but of my family, I was the fourth generation in that faith tradition that we had been raised in. Myself, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents. It had a long hold, and still does to this day, on the entirety of my family. It was not an easy decision to say, this is not for me. It was a decision that took close to 40 years, 35 to 40 years. And even when I made the decision, there was still path to be trod before I finally came to peace with a lot of it. There's a passage in the Tanya, which was written by the Alter Rebbe back in the 1700s. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, it is a book, it's a philosophy book that deals with theology of Judaism. And it teaches you how to be Jewish in a lot of ways. I mean, it's deeper than that, but the Alter Rebbe was one of those guys that was getting a lot of questions from people, and so he was running out of time, and so he just wrote it all down. And one of the things he talks about in that book is that Jewish souls have a spark, and that spark cannot be extinguished, and every Jewish soul has that spark. And when the time is right, when the time comes, that spark will ignite, and it will fan into flames the Jewish spirit of that soul and animate it. And I remember reading that passage in a class one day and asking that question. Well, what about those of us that have converted from another faith to Judaism? We chose to do that. My rabbi kind of got a little smile on his face. And he said, all Jewish souls have that spark. And when the time is right, it ignites. And while that made me feel really good, it also, it kind of made me feel, I don't want to say sad, But it raised another one of those questions. If I have this spark, why wasn't I born Jewish? Why wasn't I born Israeli? Why was I born an American? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm an American. I'm an American through and through. It is as embedded in me as anything else, probably more so than anything else. But there was that question of, why make me an American? Why take me an American Christian pastor, make me go through this whole thing to become Jewish, and still have that little, I wasn't born this way. I see stories today in the papers about Israeli citizens who live here in the United States who are reservists, booking airlines to fly home, fly back to Israel. I've been to Israel. It is, those of you watching the video behind me, it is one of the most incredibly beautiful places I've ever been. It answered a lot of my questions going there in 1997. Doesn't seem that long ago, but it was. When I stood at this place that's behind me, near En-Gedi, I finally understood my home state of Utah. I actually watched those stories. And I sent the embassy, I sent him a message, hey, do you need any old submariners? They didn't. They said thank you, but no, sorry. If we need any submariners, we sure don't need old ones. Which goes back to, okay, why am I here? Why am I an American? These are questions that have percolated in my mind for many years. I love America. I love being an American. You know this. You know I love the history of this country. And so it is that over the past few days, as we've watched what's happening, I find myself in the pages of our history, reading about why are any of us Americans? In the winter of 1775, heading into 1776, it was highly doubtful that there would be a United States. In fact, since the victory at Bunker Hill, literally nothing had gone right. The American Army, the Continental Army, now under the command of George Washington, had done nothing but retreat and lose. Retreat a little bit, fight another battle, lose, retreat a little bit more. It had shrunk in size from about 22,000 men to just around 5,000 men. Enlistments were expiring because every time there's a war, people think, oh, this will be over quick, and so they sign up for these 90-day enlistments, and it goes longer. The Army was shrinking. People were leaving because their enlistments were up. They were rethinking, well, maybe this wasn't such a great idea. People were deserting. And of those 5,000 men that were dragging through the early snows of October, November, and into December of 1775, was one man who, instead of taking every opportunity that they stopped to find something to eat, to get warm, to complain about what was going on, he would sit down with a piece of paper, anything he could find, pencil, and he would write. Writing letters on a page. I'm sure some people asked him what he was doing. We don't know that, but I'm sure that he got asked what he was doing, and he probably brushed them off with, not now, not now. I'm thinking, because that's how I get when I'm writing. And over the course of, I don't know, a couple of months, he wrote what he would call the crisis number one. You know it better today as Common Sense, by one of the American soldiers who was there, Thomas Paine. And if we remember that book at all today, we remember it for two things. Well, three. We remember it because it has zingers in it. And in our society, in our functional way of thinking, we don't think deeply. We think in sound bites. And Thomas Paine had some of those sound bites in his Common Sense pamphlet. Remember these? Sunshine Patriots. Summer Soldiers. And of course, the famous, these are the times that try men's souls. But there was so much deeper meaning in what he had to say. And I was surprised when I was listening to an audio version of the book, because it cuts out the very short one-page introduction that Thomas Paine wrote. And that introduction of this crisis pamphlet, which would go on to be the best-selling book in the history of America. Hands down, folks. Written at a time when all was lost, when the flame of liberty seemed extinguished. But like that Jewish spark, it can't be. He put these words to this page. And in the introduction, he writes these words: "The cause of America is, in great measure, the cause of all mankind." He talks about the fact that the circumstances aren't just here in the American continent, they're everywhere, universal. And that all men who love mankind, who love the natural rights they've been given, are united by that cause of freedom and liberty. He talks about the fact that those who attack freedom and natural rights not only are universal, they're attacking everyone, not just whoever they happen to be shooting at that day, are all evil. By definition, they are evil and tyrannical. And that their attack on freedom and natural rights, their attack on that idea, isn't just an attack on one, it's an attack on all. Everyone who is interested in freedom, in liberty, and in natural rights. If you are a human being and you love freedom and natural rights, life, liberty, property, among these, it doesn't matter where the attack happens, he says. You have to be concerned about it. You have to be paying attention to it. And I thought to myself, somehow or another, we as a country have forgotten that. And then I thought, did we forget it? Or has it been intentionally whitewashed from our corporate understanding of who and what we are? The corporate erasure of history is in fact a refusal on our part to inculcate ourselves with those very values that founded America, which is more than a country. It is an idea. It is a cause. And in great measure, it is the cause of all mankind. We have watched over the last week now an attempt to exterminate freedom and natural rights by Hamas. I could sit here for hours and discuss the points of this whole thing, pro and con, the history of it. Others have done a more than superlative job of doing so. And in the end of the day, what you believe about it is more about you than the reality. I prefer to abide by common sense. Anyone attempting to eradicate the freedom and natural rights of others is wrong and must be resisted by everyone who loves freedom and natural rights. You will never convince me, no matter how hard you try, that beheading children, burning the elderly in their homes, isn't violating their freedom and their natural rights. It's not freedom fighting. It's evil. And it will not stop until it's stopped. If every Jew in Israel was exterminated tomorrow, do you think that that would stop the hatred, the evil? Do you think it would stop there? Let me ask you a question. Are you taking precautions for the 13th of October, Friday the 13th of October, in which we've been told will be a worldwide jihad? If you are taking precautions, then you already know the truth. Hate that starts with the Jews won't end there. It'll come for you next. And this is why Thomas Paine wrote, "Our cause is the world's cause. Our fight for freedom and natural rights is the world's fight for freedom and natural rights." Hamas is no different than King George III. I don't know what's going to happen. I could sit here for days, contemplate, theorize. What I do know is that something will always seem to be surprising. I do know that the day is swiftly coming when each of us will be required to answer for ourselves. Am I what I say I am, or not? In the words of Thomas Paine, these are the times that try men's souls. And the truth is that the summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink away from the cause of freedom and natural rights, which is the cause of America, which is the cause of the world. Anyone who would tell you that that is not the reason for America, not the reason for our existence, is not a true American. They don't understand who we are and what we are. They have chosen to ignore our history and to not inculcate themselves with those values. Those who would deny that are those who would erase your history so as to deny you that understanding. But even in that moment, that spark is still there. That spark of liberty, which has to be fanned into flames. And when that moment comes, and it will come, you will be asked what you stand for, what you believe, what I stand for, what I believe. Who am I? The question is, will you shrink away or will you stand firm against those who hate freedom and natural rights? And in those pages, rereading Common Sense, I realized something. Maybe that's why I'm an American. Maybe that's why I wasn't born Jewish or in Israel. If I had been, would I have that understanding? If I had been born somewhere else, would I know those things? Would I care about those things? Would have I ever even read Thomas Paine, Common Sense? Would I have had that very conversation with my son last week about it? Maybe there's someone out there that'll hear this, and even if I don't convince them, maybe they'll take the time to go look it up themselves and learn from it. Maybe that's why God set me on this path that has been so long, so frustrating at times, and yet so rewarding. Maybe I was meant to understand that spark of Jewishness, the Jewish soul that was ignited and fanned into flames and brought my Jewish spirit to life, is little different from that spirit, that spark of liberty, which Thomas Paine ignited into flames of liberty. And you could argue his little pamphlet is the best-selling book in American history, led directly to the Declaration of Independence, which declared all men are created equal. All men are free. All men have unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It reminds us that we have a moral, God-given duty to oppose those who would stand against those things. It's not easy. It's not fun. But we have to do it if we believe that we are truly Americans. Because our cause is to stand for freedom and natural rights. And that is the cause of free men everywhere. And those who oppose that are tyrants and evil.